The 7-word system can be applied to anything. And today we're looking about the question of how to write a story, a novel, using the 7-word system. And the first word in the system is no. And when we think about writing any story at all, we begin with the status quo, the scenario that everything starts with. You set the scene, in other words. And if nothing happens, if nothing goes wrong, well, there's no story. So the trigger that sets everything rolling is the first statement, look, nothing's quite right about that. Something's wrong. There's a problem. In other words, you refuse something. The protagonist says, no, I'm not accepting this. And that's the beginning of the story. So the very first thing that we have to think about when we're writing our story is what scene that we're setting and what's the problem with it that we're trying to resolve. In other words, what's called the major arc of the story. And this is typically rags to riches. This person is poor and they want to do something not to be poor anymore and they end up rich. Or this person is a hero and they notice that there's a political problem and they go off and they solve that problem by defeating the enemy. Or this person is an inventor and they discover there's an absence of a solution to a problem and they find the solution. So in every case, our story's major arc is setting the circumstances which are unacceptable. And that statement of the unacceptable is the word no. Now, for you to write your story, you have to be able to answer the question, what's your story about? Very specifically, because if you don't know that answer, you don't know what story you're writing. And that answer has to be given in terms like where, when, who, and what. So set your story at a certain place, at a certain time, with the protagonist and the antagonist. You have to have a hero and a villain, or there is no story, typically. Or it's a love story when the lovers, on the face of it, want each other, and then they come across a problem. And if there's no problem, well, there's no story. So you have to set up the both sides of things. What we want and what happens instead of that in order to prevent what we want from happening. So this is all about the word no. That's the first thing you have to do with your story. Now the word hello is about expanding our imagination, the perambulations, the directions that the story move in, but most particularly the characters. We have to have a number of characters in the typical story, and they have to have qualities. And even bad characters have to have good qualities. And it's better if the good characters have bad qualities as well to make them more realistic. But you do have to create the empathy necessary for us to want to study what the bad guys are actually up to. So we develop characters, and we have to have dialogue. And we have to have adventures, and we have to have mystery and suspense, and we have to entertain people. All of this is to do with the word hello. And this comes out of our imagination. And what we're trying to do is expand the reach of the book. In the no section of our work, we said, that's not okay. We don't accept that. That's the trigger for the beginning of the story. Now in this section, we're saying, well, look, it could be this, it could be that. Our leading character tries things out and meets new people and learns new information. All of this is expansive, hello material. And you have to expand the reach of your story well beyond how it started, or there is no evolutionary development. And this also applies to the characters in your story. The characters, all the major ones anyway, they all have to go through their own evolving process. They have to go through their stuff, and they have to come up with new skills and new attitudes and new knowledge and new connections and so on. Now, all of this aspect of the story, which is pretty much the bulk of it, really, that's all hello. Now, the thank you aspect of a story is the style. And the style has to be enjoyable. Thanks is a lot to do with enjoyment. And what we're doing when we're writing a story is making people feel good. It may be that they don't feel good until the end because everything turns out for the best. Maybe. But it's also very useful to make them feel good during the story itself. So you have Shakespeare, for example, he would have comic actors, a couple of comic policemen making fools of themselves in a very serious tale. So he'd introduce this comic element. And we don't have to do that, but we can make beauty appear in the novel and have beautiful characteristics coming out of the various characters. And we can have this sense of well-being somewhere in the novel. And that goes along with this style. The style of your writing has to be enjoyable to read. So make it enjoyable reading and do some work to add to that. Now, the goodbye energy is that which moves things along. When we're saying goodbye, we say goodbye to the past and we open up the future. So goodbye is not only about leaving things, it's about moving forward to new things. In a story, this is the dynamism of the story. A really good ripping yarn moves along at quite a rate. It's a page turner. So what makes people turn the page? That's the goodbye energy. Make them want to turn the page. If there's a mysterious part of the story, they want to turn the page to find out what is that mystery? Or suspense. What will happen next? Mystery and suspense. This is a dynamic quality. Also, the minor arcs. The minor arcs are the smaller ups and downs. We want things to happen, and maybe they don't happen. There's a disappointment, and we eventually come to a resolution on that question. So this up and down, and maybe it will, maybe it won't, this kind of movement through our emotional process is the excitement of goodbye. So in Thank You, we were trying to make people feel good through beauty and love, a love interest maybe. In Goodbye, we're actually trying to make them feel excited and to want to move on to the next chapter and explanation of what's going on. So this is to do with building tension. And we tend to build tension slowly, like an escarpment, going up and up and up and up, and then resolving it suddenly. It's typical. And there's this idea within storytelling of build-ups and payoffs. So you kind of get the reader to put a lot of attention, invest a lot of time into reading this and that and the other, and you know, they're wondering, well, why is that character doing this? Why do I have to read about this? Why do I have to go to that different country or that different idea or philosophy? And you kind of make them do a lot of work in order that there's a payoff. And you have to do this if you get them to invest in a certain character. You have to get that character to be worthwhile, to be a contributor to the plot. And that's the payoff. So you have to think about investment and payoff in the goodbye aspect of the story. Now, the please aspect of a story is persuading the reader to align their own yearning for the future with the protagonist. You have to make your hero of the story persuasive. You have to get the reader on the side of the hero. That's how it is. That's the psychology that you're dealing with here. We want to support our heroes, and that's partly because we don't have a very heroic life for ourselves, the reader, and partly because it's part of the human psyche. We want to have somebody to support and be on their side, and to have some bad guys to sort of, boo, we don't like the bad guy. Have to do all of this. And this is to do with please. Please is alignment of my vision and your vision. That's what please energy is all about. And in this case, we're aligning the purpose of the protagonist in the book with the feelings, the loyalties, the perhaps the metaphor within the story for the reader's own life journey. If you're writing a romantic novel and the reader wants to find a relationship, then of course they're going to align with the protagonist who wants a relationship. That's how it all works. So the please aspect of our storytelling is to do with creating that alignment. The sorry aspect of storytelling is to do with making the reader feel sorry. And so you have a lot of things that they were expecting or hoping to happen going wrong. Thwarted purpose, disappointment, loss, betrayal. This is the action of the antagonist. So as much as we want a really kind of believable good guy, the heroine of the story and so on, we also want a rather believable bad guy, the one who creates all the problems, the one that thwarts our efforts. And to have a realistic bad guy is an important part of the story. And it could be not only the actions of the antagonist that thwart us, it could be nature or catastrophe or bad luck or the foolishness of the protagonist. It could be all sorts of reasons. But this whole sorry aspect of the story is what makes a story filled with the ups and downs, the emotionality that we get in life when we're disappointed. Grief and sense of not being worthwhile and all of these feelings that actually we don't want in our real life. We do want them in the book. We want the book to live out these disappointments for us. So you have to put a lot of disappointments in your book. And lessons. Disappointments alone, blockages and so on and so forth, they're not really worth much unless there's a lesson in it. So you have to get the protagonist to learn their lesson. And perhaps develop a measure of humility too. This is what sorry energy teaches us in life, how to experience humility. And it's good when the hero expresses a degree of modesty and that they have learned their lesson and now they're a better person. This is the character development of the hero of the story, that they end up as better people, not only because they're more successful, because they've done something they hadn't done before, but also they're nicer people. They've learned something that make them more humble, really. So that's the sorry energy. Now, of course, when we come to yes, we're resolving the major arc. Whatever was not right in the beginning, the first no, the trigger, was the problem that we have to resolve in the last part of the book. So yes is all about doing that. It's saying, look, what was unacceptable once upon a time, now we've made it acceptable. Rags, not acceptable. Riches, acceptable. Being alone and loveless, not acceptable. Now I'm happily married, acceptable. So you have to turn the story around, and that's yes. And you have to do that with all of the things that you've raised. Whatever ambiguities and unresolved issues have been raised during the whole story, you have to put them all to bed. You have to tie up all the knots and make sure that everything is dealt with. The bad guys get punished, the good guys get rewarded, and so on. And if there are a number of people helping the bad guys, they all get their comeuppance. And if there are a number of people helping the good guys, they all get their rewards. That's not how life is, but that's how novels are, and that's the stories that we want to read when we're readers. So that's the stories that we tend to want to write to please our readers. So there you have it, the 7 words of story writing. It's a really, really useful model. I've used this model of the 7-word system for writing lots of things, not just novels and fictional stories, but much more besides. And it really does work. It means that you can include all that you need to include. And you know why. You know what it is that you're trying to create in the heart of the reader. If you want them to feel sorry, you know that you do. So you make them feel that. It becomes really clear what it is you're doing and why. So have a go. Yeah, see if you can make the 7-word system work for any writing project. As I say, it doesn't have to be fictional, but it's really useful for novel writing if you've ever given that a chance to write a novel. Good luck.